Hey, I'm 53 this year, and here are marriage cheat codes I wish I knew at 33 prior to getting married that would have saved me a lot of headache and heartache. Number one, it's going to take both of you to put in consistent effort together to learn how to be an awesome, successful married couple long term. And it has to happen for the life of the relationship. In other words, forever. If you don't do this, you're doomed. Number two, if one of you wants to get help when you get stuck and the other person doesn't, it's going to be very hard to find solutions and get to a better place. For example, I might want to go to therapy, get some coaching, read a book together, listen to this podcast, and learn like, gosh, we're kind of stuck in our communication. And if you are my partner and you just sit on the bench and do nothing and resist that, we have a new problem, which is I want help and you don't. You think somehow it'll magically work. This kind of marriage will not work over time, and it's going to be doomed from the start. Number three, a lot of people think trying to change their partner to get what they want will lead to a successful marriage. That's an outside-in approach. An inside-out approach is I'm going to change to get the marriage I want. And if you don't want to come along with me, then we're not going to work. And so you want to try to vet that out very early on. Is my partner willing to do the work it takes, however big or small, consistently over time to make our marriage work so that I don't get trapped in trying to get them to change and be different. So vet them clearly from the beginning. Number four, stop thinking about marriage as a Hollywood fairy tale. This means you come into marriage with a lot of fantasies and hopes. Hey, I found the one. I met the right person, and everything should magically work out. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Every single marriage, after the infatuation stage, after falling in love, after that 1 to 2 year mark, will get challenges. They will be challenged with each other. Like, how do we communicate? Gosh, we don't seem to know how to work through conflict. Wow, we have a lot of big value differences here about money. Oh my gosh, your family's kind of a nightmare and my family's easy. How are we going to deal with that? If you don't come in with your eyes wide open to the reality that this person could be difficult over time, you're going to be very disappointed and very frustrated. If, on the other hand, you're like, hey, I'm kind of neurotic. I have some issues. They are neurotic and they have some issues. And together, we're going to see if we can figure this out. You're going to have a much greater chance of success. Number five, it's no longer about you anymore. When you get married, you're basically saying, I am up for being a team. I'm up for letting go of and softening my self-absorption and all the things that are all about me, myself, and I. I can go golfing whenever I want. I can work as long as I want. And there's no impact. When you get married, you're now sharing space. You're sharing finances. You're sharing a house. You're sharing parenting. You're sharing a lot of things. And if you don't like sharing and you're not a team player, marriage is a nightmare. Okay? It's going to be very hard for you. So don't do it, right? Go live a single life and don't worry about it. But if you want to get married, you're basically saying, I'm up for getting out of my self-centeredness and becoming a team. Number six, marriage can get hard at times, so stop complaining about that, stop blaming your partner, and just get to work. Number seven, love will never be enough to make a marriage work. What does this mean? You can't just say, well, we love each other, it should just work out. Love doesn't work that way. You fall in love so that then you can attach and have a long-term partner. And now love becomes a practice because you're going to find out things about this person that are very uncomfortable, that you don't like, that you judge, that you criticize. They're messy. They have debt. They're really sensitive. They react all the time and they're emotional or whatever. Yeah, that's a person. Okay. And loving them is practicing loving who they are as they are. And if they're egregiously creating problems like abuse, then yeah, you need to get out of that relationship. You don't work on an abusive relationship. You leave that, all right? Number eight, relationships are a team sport. I played individual sports growing up. It was all about just what I can do, ski racing and golf. I'm kind of playing on my own, right? My own game. And so when it came to marriage, it was like, wow, this is complicated. How do I be an actual teammate and pass the ball and share things? And that's much harder to do. So if you don't like team sports, don't get married. Number nine, strong couples are master communicators. Weak, insecure couples have communication problems forever, and they don't try to solve them. 10, partnership, like marriage, is the best personal growth vehicle if you want to become a better listener, a better communicator, learn how to empathize, and learn how to validate feelings. That marriage is like the ticket. It is amazing for that. But if you don't like that and don't want to learn that, then don't do it. 11, you can't solve a relationship problem that you're having from the level it was created, right? I think this is some Einstein quote. You solve relationship problems with your spouse at a new level when you have new awareness and new insight. So that's why you go to therapy or go to coaching or read and study and learn about relationships so that you can solve some of your problems together. Conflict is never a problem in a marriage. It's all in how you two deal with conflict and repair it that will make the difference between how strong and secure you are and how weak and vulnerable you are as a couple. Number 13, I'd say the master key of any marriage that's sustainable long-term and deeply fulfilling and nourishing is the ability to repair and reconnect after every single conflict or communication breakdown. Couples that get really, really good at repair tend to thrive and deepen over time because they're not running away from conflict, because they know how to repair it. If you want help, you can get my book, Getting to Zero. It's a step-by-step guide on how to repair conflict. 14, your spouse is a mirror. They're going to mirror back all the disowned and unloved and unresolved issues in you. Just try that on, right? I like to think wherever I'm triggered with my wife is an area in me that I haven't dealt with and healed or owned. Carl Jung calls this the shadow, that we project that whatever we can't see about ourselves that we don't like onto other people. That happens a lot in a marriage. Get a little more hip there and you're going to do better. 15, divorce is a natural outcome of two people that are unable and unwilling to work with their triggers, their activation, and their upset and handle each other effectively. That's all it is. Most divorce happens because people, they call it irreconcilable differences or communication issues or whatever, but it's basically you trigger me, I trigger you, and we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to communicate through that. We don't know how to repair that. We get stuck in this blame defend cycle, and we just go around and around in circles, and it becomes a nightmare, honestly. All right, if you go to therapy or you go to coaching and you try to get some help on your marriage, it's actually faster to go to couples therapy versus individual therapy or coaching. Why is that? Because a very skilled couples therapist can help the two of you work out your differences on the spot, on the Zoom session or in the office, because they have you two face each other just like you would at home, which is how you should be solving problems. Facing each other at home saying, hey, how are we going to get through this? Right? If I go to my individual therapist, the tendency is to talk about my spouse in a negative way and say, yeah, they're really a problem. How do I deal with them? They're so difficult. And they're not even there to defend themselves. And really bad therapists will believe your one-sided story about them. And that often ends, there's actually research on this, will often end marriages faster than couples therapy will. Number 17, your childhood trauma will show up in every aspect of your marriage, like it or not. So if you haven't done any work around your childhood trauma, if you have childhood trauma, it's going to spill out all over the place in your marriage, and you're going to wonder why they're so difficult or you're so difficult or why this is so hard and so uncomfortable. It's because for 18 years, you grew up in a family that wasn't that healthy, and you get into a marriage and it starts getting very challenging and you're wondering why. Well, your past actually has a lot to do with it. So if you go deal with some of the past stuff, you're going to have better chances of succeeding in marriage. 18, the blame defend cycle, or loop as I call it, is a relationship stage. It's stage 1 of a marriage, and it will go on forever unless the two of you figure out how to deal with it. So don't worry, we all blame and defend ourselves. And if you stay there year in and year out, your marriage will lead to burnout and it won't be sustainable. So you must learn how to get beyond that stage. Number 19, couples that ask, how can I be true to myself and express myself here and be honest and transparent about who I am and what I need and what I want and what I'm about and what I stand for, while considering the other person and asking, how can I still get what I want with you? I'm going to be true to me and get what I want with you. That is an incredibly orienting question. And you should ask that on a regular basis, because you don't want to be in a marriage where you feel like you use your voice and it ruins everything. Gosh, I can't be myself, so I'll just stuff it and keep the connection by like hiding how I really feel, right? I don't want to rock the boat or make this worse, so I'll just be quiet. That leads to huge resentment and a massive disconnect between the two of you. So I'm here to assert that you can get what you want, exactly the kind of relationship you want, and be true to yourself. You can do it. You just have to learn how. 20, don't rely on vows to make your marriage work. Vows are like cute at a wedding, but that's about it. That's about as far as they go, unless you build in some really sustainable agreements long-term that you both live by and hold each other accountable to. Number 21, if you've ever heard of attachment styles, like where one person gets anxious when the other person gets quiet and kind of feels abandoned, but then the more avoidant or withdrawing partner gets really irritated by the partner that wants to talk too much and talk a lot and talk about the relationship all the time. I call that an attachment dynamic. There's a lot of science to this, and I've done countless podcasts, and I even write about it in my book, and my wife studies this for a living. Attachment dynamics are a normal part of relationships. Think about it this way. For 18 years, you had an attachment dynamic. You attached to your primary caregivers, usually mom and or dad, and you attached to them. And it was life-threatening to be without them. You couldn't have survived without someone taking care of you for pretty much 18 years at least. Well, because that long-term relationship, it turns on the dependency and the attachment system in a way that friendships don't, coworkers don't. So you get married and it turns on the same system. And now you're in an attachment dynamic, an attachment relationship with your spouse forever, for as long as you're together. And so it triggers things in the nervous system and the brain in ways that a friendship doesn't. And so you can't compare, well, my friends are easy. Why is my spouse so hard? It's because you're not attached to your friends and you don't depend on them in the same way. So if you learn just a little bit about attachment dynamics, it will actually help you have a more successful marriage. Number 22, a lot of people actually think they pick their partner. Usually it's our unconscious that picks our partner. I think about it, out of 7 or 8 billion people on the planet, I found the one person that reminds me of mom and dad and triggers me into my family of origin, childhood bullshit. Wow, that's pretty precise, right? So I like to think, and there's a lot of people that share this view, that our unconscious actually finds our spouse. We tend to look for what's familiar, because if we spend 18 years with someone, we kind of want what's familiar. So if we grew up in an abusive, traumatic household, who are we going to find as adults? We're going to find an abusive, traumatizing partner because it's familiar. Consider that as a theory. If we grew up in a family that was like peaceful and quiet all the time and no one ever said anything and talked about anything, we might attract a spouse that is quiet all the time and doesn't say anything, doesn't communicate with us. So that's not necessarily a problem unless you don't know how to work with it. Number 23, successful marriages are co-created and built. They're not found. 24, affairs are the result of a co-created relationship dynamic that was dysfunctional, where two people drifted, maybe after the kids, and either one or both people didn't really attend to the relationship and say, hey, we're kind of drifting. We need to deal and address with our relationship. I'm scared. I'm starting to look around. I'm starting to look at my coworker as pretty attractive. If you can name all of that stuff and be transparent about it, you should be able to address the drift between the two of you. You want to consistently have your partner feel like a priority, no matter how busy you are. Number 25, back to our family of origin. Whatever was modeled to you around conflict will probably be either how you do conflict or you'll do the opposite. If you grew up in a really aggressive family that was super hurtful and mean-spirited and sarcastic and took verbal jabs all the time, you're either going to find a spouse that's totally the same way or the opposite, super peaceful, never wants to say anything, and then you're going to behave as like an aggressive, dominant person. It's just interesting how these dynamics work. So pay close attention to that. 26, if you become a conflict avoidant couple, meaning you don't talk about hard things, you don't talk about the crunchy stuff between the two of you, you don't know how to work through your crunchy, difficult financial conversations or conversations about sex, and you just avoid those conversations, you'll never, ever, ever reach the potential that both of you have inside of you to be an amazing couple. You have to face conflict. You have to talk about hard things if you want to get to the next place. 28, sharing power in a marriage is the gold standard. You're equals, okay? I'm not into the trad wife thing. I'm not into the man has more power or say than the woman. The man leads the home and the woman just sits on her ass and raises the kids. No, the woman's clearly leading the home. You want to be co-leaders. This is the best, most equitable situation to share power and share leadership. It's harder, it's more complex, but it's ultimately more rewarding because you respect your partner as an equal at eye level and you can go to the next level together. 29. There's a concept I teach called standing for three. That means everything we do, every decision we make runs through the filter, is this good for me, you, and us? Is what we're doing right now with our money good for me, you, and us? Is what we're doing with our family at Christmas good for me, you, and us? Is what I'm doing with my time good for me, you, and us? If it's good for me and bad for you, why the hell are you doing it? If it's good for you and bad for me, That's win-lose. We don't want to get into win-lose dynamics, right? How you get to win-win, where everybody wins, even though we have to sacrifice and compromise a little bit, is we answer the question yes to, is this good for me, you, and us? 30, do not make decisions, big ones, like kids, joining finances, buying a house, taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Don't do that until you vet your partner. And you vet your partner through your closest friends and family. You have your friends and family meet this person, hang out with them and talk to them, and you just get their take. It doesn't mean they're the decision maker. You're the decision maker. But it just means, hey, I'm going to just see if my community likes this person and just if they have any red flags. It's a really good idea to vet your partner. Too many people start having babies and doing high stakes decisions and things when they don't even know this person. And they do it in the falling in love stage when everything's great. Don't make those big decisions until you've a year or two in at least, because then you're starting to deal with a real person. And I would even recommend moving in with them and going on a long trip with them to kind of start to find out where their stressors are and what they're like when they're irritable and hangry. And, what are they like? Do they start blaming me and attacking me? Like, ooh, if so, then is this the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? 31, a closed heart, like when you're in self-protection and your heart is closed because your spouse has hurt you once or many times, that is going to put a kink in the hose of the potential of your relationship. It's going to slowly turn into a dead marriage. And a dead marriage is where two people are closed off. They've closed their hearts and they don't want to open again. It changes your sex life. It changes the intimacy between the two of you, how well you are connected. Can I look at my spouse in the eye and feel safe? All that stuff. So you've got to, if your heart is closed, and it will happen, you've got to learn as a couple how to open hearts again. Next, you should always be able to talk about your relationship, no matter when, where, or why. When your partner says to you, hey, can we talk about our relationship? Your answer should be 100% yes. Of course, honey. Never shut down that conversation, because if you do, you're shutting down your partner's concerns, their vulnerability, their curiosity. You're just saying, no, we don't talk about that. And you have to look at, if I ever did shut down a question like that, like, why? What am I so threatened by? What am I so scared of? What's the big deal here? So a good, healthy, secure, strong relationship can always talk about what's going on in the relationship. All right, these are just several of my ideas coming from my 22-year relationship with my wife. We've been married almost 19 years. We've got 2 kids. Both of us work with couples. I've been working with couples for the last 20 years. So I know a thing or two about marriage and long-term commitment and what works and what doesn't work. If you want more info, definitely sign up for my newsletter at jasongaddis.com/newsletter. The link is in the description. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you in the next video.